Hi, I'm Billy, and welcome to Jack of Trades. This video is a part of the React, Express, and MySQL full stack web app development series. If you're still new to this video, watch the previous parts. I'm going to put the link in the description below. In this video, we are going to build our client application using React.js. I will also provide the link to the GitHub page to download the source code for Express API and the React app. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting a React.js project is pretty straightforward. To make this easier for us, let's go to w3schools.com and follow the instructions on installing the React.js app. There are only two commands that we're supposed to run when starting a React project. The first command will be the installation of the Create React App installer in Node.js. And the second command is the one that creates the actual React application. I also recommend that you read the full tutorial in React.js at W3 Schools, since the way they implement their tutorials are also very straightforward and easy to follow along. We will not be covering too much to understand how React works, since we only want to show how full stack web development goes on a bigger picture when using these three technologies. And it's quite reasonable that we make a separate video for that in the future, because it's going to be a whole lot of a topic on its own. Instead, if you have prior knowledge working with React.js, this video will benefit you. Now that we installed our React app, let's open up our project and start coding for our client application. But before that, let's install a few libraries that we are going to need for our React.js application. The first one is the React Bootstrap for our CSS. The React Router DOM to handle the page routing when we navigate from different pages in our app. The React Cookie to store some information in our browser, information that we needed to persist in every page navigations we do. The Moment.js library to handle the date and time format for out data. The Axios library, so that we will be able to send requests to our backend REST API that we prepared from the previous video. And the React Helmet library, so that we can easily inject tags in the header part of our main HTML. Under the src directory, where all our React components must reside, let's create another directory called Pages. We will put two components here that will handle the login UI and the tweets UI. We will name them tweet.jsx and login.jsx. Since the app.js file is our main component, let's replace the render function's content. We will import all the other components in this file. React only runs with one parent component for one whole app. You can even write your entire web application in this one file. But in the real world, that is going to become a problem when your project grows. So, we approach this to isolate each component in different files and naming them descriptively. Just like we did earlier. We created the files under the src/pages directory, the login.jsx, and tweak.jsx. Before anything else, I would like to show a technique that pretty comes in handy. When you are a front-end developer, there are no excuses for having a CSS file for your web app design. Here, I will show you a Visual Studio Code plugin called Live Sass Compiler that generates a compiled CSS file that you will import for your project. Let us delete our app.css file and create a directory called CSS. We will create a Sass file. Sass is a preprocessor scripting language that is interpreted or compiled into cascading style sheets. With Sass, we can isolate our CSS into different files, and Sass compiles everything into one file. Once you install the Live Sass compiler, you can see a little button below the Versus Code Editor. You select your SCSS file and click Watch Sass. From there, you can code your Sass script, and the Live Sass compiler compiles your script into a CSS file. We will have a separate tutorial for this in future videos to better understand Sass's advantage in our web development. But for now, let's focus ourselves on one file, the app.scss file, to handle the styling. Now let's begin importing the things that we need in our application. The ones that we downloaded earlier. Let's import the cookies provider in our application's entry point, which is the index.jsx. As you can see in this file, we imported our app.jsx to be rendered in the DOM. The index.js file is a file where our app.jsx parent component resides. This is how it is done when you are working with React. We will go into detail with this in another video series. For now, let's wrap our app component with the cookies provider component. we need to wrap our main app component with the browser router component. The browser router component enables us to navigate from pages to pages flawlessly when working with React.js. And inside this, we will make the basic layout of our web app, which is the navigation menu in the content body. Since we are using React Bootstrap, we should follow what's on their documentation if we wanted to use their ready-made components. Now, let's begin writing the code for our login component. This component is just an email and password form. We will create this component as a class-based component since we will write a pretty decent amount of functions inside this class. Let us then create the basic look of our tweet component. We will update these components later when we add real functionalities to them. For now, let's prepare them for our router content. In our router file, let's create a simple JSON object with 3 properties on each element. We will call them as path, name, and component. So the idea is that we will pass these array of item values to our router component. We will display the components according to the link we are mapping them out by making this approach. We will put the router component in our App.js file later on. Now, let's import our routes object in our App.js file. We will then add the router component, which will be the one responsible for displaying our contents. Remember that we imported the routes.js file, which contains the object for mapping out the links and the component we wanted to show. We will use the JavaScript map function so that we can loop through those objects. Let's make the cookies that we will use for our session that is available to the entire application. We can implement a function by doing a React hook approach. I'm going to explain what React hooks later. If you're still new with the React cookie library, you can refer to the documentation. Let's put a JavaScript code that will refresh the cookie. In this case, we are setting a user ID cookie. The reason why we put this in the app.js file is that we wanted to refresh the token every time the user navigates. This user ID cookie is the one that we're going to receive from the API call that we will do later from the login component. Since this user ID cookie is saved in the browser, this will serve as the one to handle our session. There are two ways to manage data persistence on the client side. That is the cookies and the local storage. Both are the same, but the only difference is that a cookie has an expiration time, and the local storage doesn't. Let's use our .env file to store our React cookie expiration time. To further emphasize this, we will rename our .env file to .env.local. We will store our cookie's max age or expiration time in our .env.local and access it in our frontend via process.env object. We will download another node package called the env-cmd. We will also update our package.json file scripts to make this work. Let us prepare another function that will determine whether the user is logged in or not. And we will make the tweet and the logout links appear only when the user is logged in. And the login link will only appear if the user still needs to log in. Now, let us establish the full functionality of our login component. We will need to instantiate the React cookies components in this file to set our user ID cookie value when we make an API call for the login authentication. We will be using Axios library to make an API call. Let's make a function that will check if the email and the password are empty. Let's prepare our login function, set user cookie function, and a function to handle our user inputs. Let us then make the user interface for the login. Note that we are using React Bootstrap components here. You can refer to the documentation of React Bootstrap. I will put the link in the description below. Now, let's put in the real logic of our login after we disabled the button. The setState function has a callback function. Let's make another function and call that function for the login process. We are implementing a basic auth here. The way this works is that we pass our email and password in the header's authorization and not in the form. And we encode our user credentials to base 64 to ensure that the data is intact and not tampered during the transportation. Remember to put in a colon symbol between the email and the password before you encode it to base 64. Now that our login process is working, let's add in some real code to our tweet component. Because our tweet component is a functional component, we need to use React hooks. The React hook feature is a way for a React.js app to manage a functional component state. The first element of the array React hook is the variable name, the second one is the function associated with for that variable. And useState function is a function in React hooks that tells your app you want to use states. We will see this in action later. Here we can set the value of the tweet by calling out the function setTweet that we set earlier. That's how straightforward React hooks are. Here's another fun part. We will try to save our tweet in the database using the endpoints we prepared from the last video. We will get the new list after we save our tweet. But, let's comment them out in the meantime. Now, let's create our function getList to get all the tweets associated with this current user logged in. Notice that we just copied the setTweetList function from above and pasted in our function. By doing this, we can save the tweets in the tweetList variable in our React hook. What's left for us to do is display the list of the tweet list we queried from our database. Just below our form, let's use a React Bootstrap component card to set the UI for our tweet list. Along with it, we're going to include a delete button. We're going to loop through all the tweet list items using the JavaScript map function. We are getting this error because I'm trying to display what's inside the variable tweet list without even checking beforehand if it is empty. Let's test our little demo. Also, make sure that the Express API we built from the previous video is up and running. Now it's working. So, that's how full stack web development behind the scenes. We code, we encounter errors, we fix them. And that concludes our React, Express, and MySQL full stack web development series. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Write down your comments below and hit subscribe if you're new to this channel. Be sure to click that notification bell to get notified whenever a new video is up. Stay tuned, and see you in the next video.